Welcome to the NBA Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilba. With me is Brent Hyden. Taking a look at tonight's Monday slate for FanDuel and DraftKings. Just a six-game slate to kick off the week. We're going to be a little bit hesitant about some players here, just on some back-to-backs and some previous injury. You and I both, we have a little bit of an uncomfortable feeling here.
Yeah, everything is setting up for tonight to be one of those nights where 5 minutes before lock, we just get flooded with all kinds of news. I have a couple teams that are like battling a bunch of injuries that are on back to backs and may not get that news in time to do anything about it. But we're setting up for what could be a very, very interesting night of basketball.
You got the crime scene investigation on the whiteboard, and for those who didn't see last night, Embiid's Instagram post after with his location was quite comical, although people don't take it as such.
Yeah, apparently people here in OKC are talking trash because Embiid was, talking smack and posted that after the loss. But I want to remind people that Russell Westbrook talks smack to everyone every single game, and we've lose a lot of games. So I have no issue with Embiid doing that, and I think it's hilarious. So Embiid can keep on trolling if he wants to keep on trolling.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen the video of Westbrook dribbling out the clock and staring at Embiid, please find it because it is absolutely hilarious.
It is the funniest thing I've seen in a long time. Just like dribbling out the clock and just staring at Embiid, not like blinking or anything. It was great.
Let's dig into tonight here. Charlotte and Indiana, our first game. 213 over under. Charlotte's Indiana's third game in 4 nights, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll brutal stretch here, but Indiana, they've played all 3 games at home, so no travel. But on the Charlotte side here, we'll start with Dwight Howard. Obviously, a guy that you talk about in your GPP article, and I say obviously because we were talking about that before the show, and how many times he's found your way into that article.
I don't want to go back and look because I'm lazy, but if someone wants to go back and look and comment on this YouTube video later on how many times I've written up Dwight Howard this season, go for it. I feel like I've written him up every single night that he plays, just about, unless it's been against like Miami. But yeah, Dwight Howard, I absolutely love him tonight. If you haven't been paying attention, this dude has been absolutely just mashing recently. He's got over 50 fantasy points over his last 3 games. Blocks have been just insane recently. Like over his last 10 games, here are his blocks: 4, 7, 6, 3, 6, 3, 2, 4, 3, 1, 4. It's a lot of blocks. Dude, I don't know if he's pissed off because he got snubbed by the All-Star game, or like if he's drinking some magical elixir that like turned him back like 10 years in age. Whatever it is, he's going ham recently. And I know he's expensive, but going up against a Pacers team that is absolutely terrible against centers, they give up a bunch of rebounds, a bunch of points in the paint, a lot of second chance points. I am not fading Dwight Howard tonight. Just not going to do it at all.
Yeah, I don't care about the price. Like he's 10-1 on FanDuel. I don't care about that. On DraftKings, he is 9-1. He's still up there with the rest of the centers tonight. And I just still think like people are probably going to still play more Towns than they do Howard. People are going to look at Jokic in last game. Like we're still probably going to get Howard at mediocre ownership.
Probably. And I think the price, especially on FanDuel, is going to have people off of him. DraftKings probably too. Given that he's up to 9,100, like that's 1,100 more than he was last game against Miami. Only 300 more than what he was against Atlanta a couple games ago. Again, I just don't care about the price. Like there's very few guys on the slate that I feel comfortable in them going out and getting like 50, 52 fantasy points. He's one of them. So like even at 10K, if I'm getting 50 fantasy points out of him at like 10, 15% ownership, yeah, I'm going to take that all day.
Yep. Kemba Walker tonight's a little bit expensive. He's the one guy. It's a weird slate because point guard is pretty top heavy. Like some of the bottom guys really aren't in that great a spot. So I don't mind using Walker. If this was kind of a different slate and how things would shape up, like I think I'd be off of him because Indiana's been better against point guards of late. But obviously we've seen Kemba he's been playing really well. He's been playing heavy minutes. Could be the fact that he's showcasing off for another team. I don't know what it is, but I mean, the usage is crazy. I mean, what, 20 plus field goal attempts in 5 straight games. Even if he's not shooting well, he's still putting up massive points.
Yeah, I do think he's a fine tournament option. You could also go there in cash games. I will, caution that Indiana has been really good against point guards of late. They're fourth in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games. So that's a little concerning. But again, I mean, we're talking about a guy who's been at 40 minutes in 2 of the last 4 games. You mentioned the field goal attempts over 20 and 4 or 5 straight games. Production's been solid. I definitely don't mind that. And he's been the guy, like, because Dwight's been playing really well, like it's really helped Kemba Walker. So if you wanted to start building around both those guys, feel free. Walker's an interesting pivot off of guys like Kyrie Irving that are probably going to be a little bit chalky tonight.
Yep. Do you have any interest in the secondary guys here? We've seen Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Marvin Williams kind of come alive of late. Jeremy Lamb's burned me the last few games in good spots, but he's still fairly cheap and the minutes are still there. I don't mind these guys on tonight's slate, like his value, because there isn't a lot to love.
Both Batum and Marvin Williams are a little bit interesting. Batum, just a guy that's, basically just filling up the stat sheet. His price is starting to get up there. He's like 5,700, a little bit lower than what it was a couple games ago. I think he's a fine cash game option. You could feel comfortable in him coming out and probably getting, 25, 28 fantasy points with some upside that we've seen recently. Marvin Williams, the Pacers do struggle to defend power forwards. They do struggle at times to defend spot up shooters as well. And that's basically what Marvin Williams is. He's spotting up like 40% of his possessions. He's one of the better spot up shooters in the NBA. He's 4,200 on DraftKings. That's a pretty fair price for him there. 45 on FanDuel. I don't mind him like as a guy that you could, plug in your lineups if he's like the last guy in and you have basically what his salary is to fit him in.
Yeah, I mean, he's averaging 28 minutes over his last 5 games, averaging 21 fantasy points. Like, not bad numbers for a guy in the lower fours.
Yeah, it's really not. And like he has upside. I mean, we've seen it over the past few games. Like he has 35, 36 fantasy point upside. And a matchup like this, Indiana has been playing significantly slower. So like he's not going to get a pace bump or anything, but in a matchup like this against, Thaddeus Young and some of these other guys that really can't defend very well, I definitely don't mind him.
Yep. Lamb, Kaminsky, any interest here?
Not really, no. Like Lamb is probably a little more interesting if MCW sits and he is questionable, but yeah, I'm not really looking. There's guys in those same price ranges that are probably better plays tonight.
Yep. On the Indiana side, obviously we can start with Victor Oladipo here. I don't mind using him, but like he's a guy who's like we have to consider him. He's now a guy who's basically a pay up option at his price, and I just don't think he's going to be my favorite pay up option.
Yeah, I'm not really that interested in anyone from the Pacers side of this game. Like Oladipo's fine for cash. Like he feels like a fairly safe cash option. Like you can plug him in at his price of like 9,300, 9,300 on both sides and feel pretty comfortable that he's going to get you like 40 fantasy points, which on a slate like this is probably good enough. But I think there's much better options at the guard positions tonight.
Yeah, I think so too. Darren Collison, I still don't mind on FanDuel. Like he's 5,500, averaging 33 fantasy points over his last 5 games, minutes right around 31. I mean, he's kind of solidified himself a little bit here. Like Collison, we always kind of thought was just this GPP guy because we've seen Corey Joseph take over. We've seen Collison go missing at times. But, I mean, his recent stretch of play really this month has been excellent.
Yeah, it really has. Not someone that I'm considering on DraftKings, but as you mentioned, he's 5,500 on FanDuel. I do like that price there against a Charlotte team. They're about league average over the last 10 games in defensive efficiency against point guards. So I don't hate the play there. I guess if you really wanted to reach for someone from the Pacers, Thaddeus Young, a little bit interesting. He's been playing fairly well of late. I think he did have a down game against Cleveland, but against Orlando, against Phoenix, San Antonio, some solid outings there. Definitely boosted by his steals. He has 3, 3, 3, and 2 over his last 4 games, but 20 plus real points in 2 of the last 4. Charlotte 29th in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games against power forwards. I don't hate Thaddeus Young in this spot, like as another guy in that kind of mid range. But outside of that, like I'm not looking at Turner and I'm not looking at Sabonis, any of these other guys except maybe Lance Stevenson, who has like, unlike Kimball Walker, has actual home road splits this season, like 25 fantasy points per game at home, 17 on the road. He I guess just loves playing in Indiana. So if you wanted to take a shot on Lance Stevenson coming off a big game, feel free.
Yeah, don't mind it. Let's move on here. Minnesota and Atlanta. Minnesota in a good spot here against this Atlanta defense. We'll start here we'll talk about Jimmy Butler. Obviously, bounced back last game from the injury, played 35 minutes. So no issue with that knee, according to Tibbs. I mean, you knew he was going to play 30 plus minutes if he was going to be in the game.
Yeah, like if Jimmy Butler is playing, he's playing a bunch of minutes. Before we get too deep into this, Teague is questionable for this game, so we want to monitor the news for that. But I wrote up Jimmy Butler in the GPP article. Like I don't care about his again. He's like Dwight tonight. Like I don't care about his price. Like I know his price is up there, but like he is one of the other players that I think has 50, 55 fantasy point upside in this matchup. I'm not fading him against the Atlanta Hawks. Like, I don't care if people think the bench is getting more run or Jimmy Butler might be limited minutes, whatever. Like, just play him. Like, this is an excellent matchup. He did not shoot very well against Brooklyn, shot 28.6%, still got to the line 14 times. He's boosting his stats. Like, he's got rebounds, assists, like, he's got triple double upside here. Atlanta turns the ball over a ton, so the blocks and steals are going to be there for him. Like, I just don't see a reason to fade Jimmy Butler here tonight against the Atlanta Hawks. The biggest downside with the Hawks is they're being getting blown out by everybody, but over their last 5 home games against Western Conference opponents, they are 5-0. So maybe they put up a fight tonight. Who
They could.
knows?
They could. And we look at the small forward position on FanDuel. Once again, Jimmy Butler. Kind of that's why I didn't like Victor Oladipo that much. I'd rather just pay up $100 more for Butler. FanDuel, obviously, I think he's an excellent play because small forward, small forward really outside of Giannis is fairly weak tonight. We look at the kind of secondary options for Minnesota, and with Butler back, potentially Teague out tonight. Like I like Howard more than Towns. Like we've seen Towns be decent, but I think Howard has the higher ceiling here, even though Towns is in a great spot as well.
I think Towns probably actually has a higher ceiling here, given like he actually for like recently has played better with Butler kind of on the floor. Like I know Towns had a big game against Houston. But like I think he actually does kind of benefit a little bit from Butler being there. Like I love Towns here. Like I will take Howard on DraftKings because he's just a little bit cheaper. But like on FanDuel with Towns being cheaper than Howard, like I think he's an excellent option. And if you're playing on DraftKings or Fantasy Draft or somewhere like that, and you wanted to use 2 centers, like Towns is an excellent option to pair with Dwight Howard. Like I love him in this matchup. Like I said, I think I'm going Howard personally on DraftKings just because you save a little bit of money, but I definitely think Towns has, a pretty massive ceiling in this matchup. I would not be afraid to use him at all. Going back to Jimmy Butler real quick, DraftKings, please give him shooting guard small forward eligibility. Please, I beg you. Like please do it. Like I need that multi-position eligibility. I need it. It's so frustrating.
It does when you get to building lineups and you're like, oh, nice. I can use Butler at small forward. No, you can't, and it's the worst.
It really is. If Jeff Teague sits, Tyus Jones lock and load at 3,600 on DraftKings. He does have multi-position eligibility. Weird how he has it and Jimmy Butler does not. He's 3,800 on FanDuel. Yeah, you're locking and loading him at that price. If we get word that Teague is fine, which again we need to monitor the news. Like if he's gonna play, Tibbs is gonna play him a bunch of minutes. It is a revenge game.
That's true. That is true. And
it is in Atlanta against a team that struggles against point guards. and struggles against the pick and roll.
I wouldn't mind throwing some Teague in there, probably solely for the revenge, to be honest, because Teague has been a frustrating guy at times to roster this year. We've seen it with his recent play. I mean, sort of matchup dependent, I guess we could say as well this year. So obviously that suits him tonight. You mentioned Tyus Jones. You mentioned obviously Atlanta turns the ball over quite a bit. Tyus Jones is a guy who can rack up steals, and at his price, like he's obviously not going to be a big usage guy out there on the court with the starters, but as always, if Teague sits, we know Tibbs plays this guys a ton of minutes. We've seen that in the past with Butler out. We've seen in the past with Teague out. So like you can feel pretty safe. And now the fact that Jones is, we were playing him when he was what 4,500, 5K, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, like you're pretty much you're paying 3,800 for a guy that you like know is going to go out and get you like 25 to 28 fantasy points. So like, yeah, just give me that all day long. And if Teague sits, I do think Wiggins is very interesting. Like I know he saw a big boost with Butler off the floor, but in games that Teague has sat this season, Wiggins averages 33 fantasy points per game compared to 28.7. Excellent matchup for Wiggins. I would not be afraid to lock and load him, Butler, Tyus Jones, Towns, any of those guys if Teague is out tonight.
Definitely not. I know Atlanta's been a little bit better against the power forward position of late, but I don't mind Taj Gibson. His price probably a little bit more on FanDuel. He's 5,800. He's another guy I can pretty much kind of rely on. Like he's averaging 28 fantasy points over his last 5 games. You're kind of going to be around that 25 fantasy point mark. I think in tonight's game, you look at a bad rebounding Hawks team. He's a guy who could pretty much fall into a double-double here.
Yeah, he could. I don't mind that. Gorgie Jang's a little bit interesting if we don't get any excellent value that opens up. He's not going to come in and play a bunch of minutes, but like he could get 15, 17 minutes, get you the 20 fantasy point mark. And if we do see Jeff Teague sit, I would not shy away from using some Jamal Crawford in this matchup either.
Yep, I'm with you. Moving over to Atlanta side against a Minnesota defense that's been pretty good. I'm not a big fan of the Atlanta side here on tonight's slate. There are some cheap options I do think you can take a shot with. I don't mind John Collins for cheap. We were joking around. He's not going to be sneaky.
No, I've listened to a couple podcasts this morning. I've clicked around a couple articles and like everyone has John Collins as a sneaky GPP play. So he's not going to be sneaky. If you want to roll him out there, go for it. He's a really solid value on DraftKings at 4,900. Let's see. What is he on FanDuel? He's 5K. Yeah, that's fine. Like you're looking at a guy that's probably going to come out and get in foul trouble. But like if he can get 26 minutes, he's got double upside. So yeah, feel free to roll Collins out there if you want to. Dennis Schroeder's really, really interesting. He's 7,200 on DraftKings, 73 on FanDuel. In a matchup against a team that hasn't really played great defense against point guards. They're 30th in the league, and over the last 10 games, the defensive efficiency. I don't necessarily mind him. I think it's a very, very interesting spot here for Dennis Schroeder. I wouldn't roll him out in cash games, but if you wanted to take a shot on him in tournaments, I think he's definitely interesting. And then Kent Bazemore and Taurean Prince, both guys really cheap for the upside that they have. Both guys really, really tough to rely on, though.
Yeah, like you could look at one of those two in GPPs. I like Schroeder a lot in tournaments. It's just basically figuring out Bazemore Prince it's always just going to be a tough thing. I probably prefer Bazemore just maybe a little bit more here.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, both of them have upside. Both of them have flashed massive upside, and given their prices, you could come out and get either one of them putting up like 30, 40 fantasy points, but like they're so unpredictable and they're so tough to trust. I mean, Bazemore in a good matchup against Washington, 1 of 9 from the floor, 18 minutes. Like it's just really tough to trust either one of these guys. So tournaments, they're fine. I would not look at either one of them in cash.
Yeah, I don't really have any interest in any of the other bigs outside of Collins.
No, not really. Dedmon is a fine cash option. Like he does have the letdown games like we saw against Charlotte and Toronto. Not the greatest of matchups, so they're predictable letdown games. But I mean, against Washington, Utah, Chicago, New Orleans, some of these other games where he's playing like 22, 24 minutes, like he's putting up solid fantasy production. He's at 4,600 on DraftKings. There's a bunch of centers that I really, really like. So I probably won't see myself going there, but he's a fine cash option.
Yep. Anything else you want to talk about here?
No.
Philly and Milwaukee next. Philly on a back-to-back. That's kind of worrisome, I think, for Embiid here. Coming off the game, in OKC, he said he's available to play. 8 o'clock start. I feel like Philly is just going to drop a bomb on us. I think probably shortly after lock or shortly right before.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like he came out and said he's available to play. The team's basically saying it depends on how he's feeling and his status is to be determined. Like he played 36 minutes last night against OKC, a very physical, like charged up game. I really have a hard time believing he's actually going to play on this back to back. Like I don't see it. Hopefully we get news in time so we can adjust. We obviously have to monitor the news of Malcolm Brogdon for this game. Jared Bayless is questionable. Robert Covington is a guy to keep an eye on. Late in last night's game, he smacked his head on the floor like really, really hard. He was able to play after it happened, but just something else to keep an eye on. Like, concussion symptoms sometimes don't show up until late the next day. So I would definitely keep an eye on the status of Covington today as well.
Yeah, definitely make some contingency plans if you're planning on using Philly guys here, because it's an excellent spot for Embiid. Like if this wasn't a back-to-back here, like I'd be thrilled to just be tossing him into some lineups against this Milwaukee front court that ranks 28th in defensive efficiency against theirs the last 10 games. Not a great rebounding team. Like I'll still take some GPP shots with him. Granted that he's going to be good to go tonight, but I don't feel anything safe about it.
Yeah, you can't use him in cash just because one, obviously we don't know if he's going to play, and we may not get that news in time. And two, like we don't know how he's going to perform on a back to back. This is the first ever back to back we're going to see him play in. Like who knows what he's going to do? So like if you wanted to take a tournament shot on him, go for it at 9,800. I'd rather have Cat there. I'd rather have Dwight Howard there. Yeah, like again, tournament shots if you want to. I think he's going to be popular though if we get news that he's going to play, like just because the whole Milwaukee matchup, everyone's going to lock him and load. So I like if we get news that he is confirmed playing, I would probably fade in tournaments. If we don't get that news in time, I would probably actually play him a little bit in tournaments because people are probably going to move off of him.
Right. And I think, the guy that I feel the safest about here is still Dario Saric. Got into foul trouble last night. He only played 21 minutes, but, still scored 20 fantasy points. Usage rate continues to be over 20% over his last 5 games. Like, he's been over 30 fantasy points in 5 of the last 6. He's a guy, once again, I feel completely safe about. Still at a decent price range. I mean, he's still a little bit expensive, I guess you could say. But Saric is one guy that's just been locking and loading.
Yeah, he's been outstanding of late. Like if people just look at the last 2 games, they'll be like, oh, he hasn't been that good. That price is way up there. I don't want to pay it. And then even against Chicago, 41 fantasy points at 28 minutes. But he's been just ridiculously outstanding. And he is an excellent option if we don't get the Embiid news, because we already know he gets a massive boost whenever Embiid is off the floor. Like he's just a lock for 40 fantasy points with Embiid out. So if we don't get Embiid news, Saric is an excellent option as kind of a contingency. And even if we do get Embiid news, I still think you can look at Saric in this matchup. So I do like him a lot. Would be a guy that I have a significant amount of exposure to. I'm not terribly excited about Simmons in this spot. If you wanted to take a shot on him, go for it. The rest of this Philly team, it's so tough without getting news of Bayless and everyone else to really break it down.
Yeah, it hasn't been fun. And these cheap guys they're not fun guys to roster. We look at McConnell, he struggled a little bit of late. If Bayless comes back, obviously that's going to take a little bit of minutes away from him. The only cheap guy that's really been somewhat decent is Justin Anderson, playing 20 minutes over his last 3 games, 27, 18, 20 fantasy points. Doing a little bit of everything here. He's got 4 steals in those 3 games. He will come up and take some shots. I don't mind him as a punt guy.
He's fine. Like I would feel more comfortable if we get news about Bayless. If Covington for whatever reason isn't able to go because of a concussion or whatever, then Anderson would be definitely a guy to look at. And one quick update: Butler came through Saturday's return fine. Crawford's good. And Teague said his ankle that bothered him versus Nets is all right.
Did you ever watch Arrested Development?
No.
There's a doctor and he says, your son's going to be all right. And it's because his son lost his left hand. So he's going to be all right. And that's just what popped into my head. But still keep an eye on the T news because obviously the injury reporting is just an absolute joke.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
Anyone else want to touch on from Philly?
No, again, just monitor the news. Like if Embiid doesn't play, you can look at Amir Johnson and Rashawn Holmes, both guys in play. You could stack both of them if you really wanted to. Like going back and looking at the last couple games without Embiid against Denver, Sean Holmes, 18 minutes, 25 fantasy points. Amir Johnson, 22 minutes, 24 and a half fantasy points. Against Toronto, Holmes, 27 minutes, 31 fantasy points. Amir Johnson, 21 minutes, 25 fantasy points. Both guys usable in all formats if Embiid does not play.
Yep. On the Milwaukee side, this is another situation. Like Giannis, I don't feel 100% comfortable with either. It's more comfortable than Embiid, but on the back-to-back here against a guy who's been dealing with knee soreness of late, like they have to be somewhat cautious here.
Do they? I mean, it's the NBA. Like, I mean,
I guess if I was running this team, I'd be a little bit cautious, but I'm not. So maybe he will go out there and play 35 plus and be fine.
Hopefully, I would like to think that Joe Prunty has a little bit more common sense than Jason Kidd, but who knows at this point? Obviously, you do want to monitor the news. If he plays, it is a good spot for him. I would not shy away from using him in all formats. It's interesting to note. Okay, so Joe Prunty's been there for 3 games now, and the Bucks are 3-0, and Giannis, his usage rate has been through the roof recently. I think it's like up. I think it's actually like the last 4 games is what I pulled here. Last 4 games, 36.3% usage. That's pretty solid. I guess he's only played in 2 of those. So yeah, but that usage rate pretty high. So if you want to roll him out there, go for it. Again, we're waiting on Malcolm Brogdon news. If Brogdon does not play, I absolutely love Chris Middleton in the spot. If Brogdon does play, I think Middleton is still a little bit interesting, but I think his ceiling is capped by Brogdon being there.
No, I agree. What are you doing with Bledsoe here? You kind of like a Philly. Have been better against point guards of late. Bledsoe's kind of take a little bit of a backseat to the other two here. I don't mind him though at his price. Like he's only $7K on FanDuel. That price has dropped a little bit. He is 6,900, so I guess his price has dropped on both sites. So I don't mind Bledsoe here for a cheaper option.
Okay, so I'll cover Bledsoe first, and then I'll get to the why I'm like cracking up here. Bledsoe's fine. I'm just not high on him. Like his production has been down. Steals and things like that have been ridiculous. So if you want to roll him out there on FanDuel, go for it. But I'm kind of off that train. Like I think I would rather have Schroeder and a couple other options. But Shams Charania. Sources, after heated verbal exchange in practice between Joakim Noah and Jeff Hornacek last week, the Knicks are exploring avenues to part ways with Noah. I love the NBA. I love it. How can you not be entertained by all this stuff? How can you not?
Someone
it's amazing.
There was a tweet that said something about Noah that he was going to leave the team for personal reasons, and someone asked, what has he been doing all that during this time anyway? He's been collecting checks, man. He's sitting there just collecting checks from the Knicks. Like, what a job!
I mean, that's what he's been doing like this entire season. So, yeah, it's amazing and hilarious, and I love it. In the NBA, I love this league.
Good stuff. John Henson, I want to talk about under the new coach here. Like minutes have been more consistent for Henson, I think, this season, especially of late. But he's been great over the last 3 games, and I kind of feel like he's going to be a guy who benefits a lot with Kid out.
Yeah, he could. I think I do have interest in him if Embiid sits,
Yeah,
if Embiid plays, I'm probably off of him. And I don't really want to use him on DraftKings just because he's center only eligible there. If he's still so FanDuel,
he's power forward. He's only 5,500.
yeah, I think he's a fine option on FanDuel if Embiid sits.
Yeah. If you're looking elsewhere, like I'm pretty much on the main guys here for Milwaukee. Like if Brogdon sits, Sterling Brown will get run. Not my favorite punt option though.
No, and like if he's gonna be popular, like I've already seen him written up in places. Don't chase the big game against Chicago. Like just don't. Like this dude is bad. He averages like 0.7 fantasy points per minute. Just he's bad. Like he played 40 minutes against the Sixers last time out and couldn't even get 20 fantasy points. Like, are you really wanting to play that if he's going to be chalky? Like I'll pass. Hard pass.
Yeah, I don't want that. That's pretty much it for Milwaukee.
I would rather like, yeah. I was gonna say something about Tony Snell, but no, I'll just move on.
Milwaukee and Memphis, the all injury report game here, it seems.
Phoenix and Memphis, not Milwaukee and Memphis.
Oh,
Phoenix.
Phoenix and Memphis. It's Monday, man. Give me a break here. Devin Booker questionable. Alex Len questionable. Greg Monroe probable, obviously, after getting thrown out yesterday. We'll start here with Booker if he sits tonight. Obviously, that kind of opens the door for really Josh Jackson, who's actually shown some upside here of late.
Yeah, also should mention Tyson Chandler. It is a back-to-back, so he's probably going to sit. Troy Daniels is also questionable for tonight's game. So lots and lots to talk about from both sides of this game. I don't even want to rattle off the Memphis injury report right now. But yeah, Devin Booker, the beat writers basically saying like they don't expect him to play. Like he was in intense pain, hip and ribs bothering him, played 40 minutes last night. If he sits, that's going to open up minutes for Troy Daniels, who, if he plays, is interesting at his price of only 3,800. You mentioned Josh Jackson. I covered him in the GPP article. Dude can't hit a shot to save his life some games. Like he went 0 for 13 against Houston, but it is promising to know that he shot 13 times despite not hitting a single shot. Double-digit field goal attempts in 3 straight games. Minutes are trending upwards. He's playing the shooting guard position against a Memphis team that, as of late, has really struggled against shooting guards. I believe they're 21st now in fantasy points allowed, about 42 per game. He's racking up rebounds, some steals, and assists in there as well. Like I have a lot of interest in Josh Jackson here tonight if Devin Booker sits. TJ Warren is a name to keep an eye on. He played 40 minutes last night. Back-to-back. Maybe he gets limited minutes. Maybe he doesn't play. I don't know. I don't really want to go there with him. Like I feel like he's going to be mega chalk in a spot where like there's an obvious path to him failing without Booker. Like defenses can key in on him. And like if we go back and look, like most of the games where Booker sat over that stretch, like
Warren was games.
Yeah, they weren't that great of games. Like he had a couple good ones, but like there were a lot of really bad games. So if you want to eat the chalk in cash games, feel free. But again, I think there's a clear path to him being a bust tonight in this matchup. So I would warn against him. Greg Monroe, yes, all the Greg Monroe, please. Just give me all of it. Like if Alex Len is out, Tyson Chandler is out, give me like 104 million% Greg Monroe. Like I will lock him in even at 5,600 on DraftKings. Like I just want all the Greg Monroe in the spot.
Yeah, and so Monroe, even though he's higher priced on DraftKings, the power forward eligibility makes him so much better play for me because even though he's cheap on FanDuel, he's 4,500. Like he's a center, and it sucks up a lot of spots that I'm like, well, how am I getting my Howard exposure in the lineup? How am I getting Towns? How am I getting Embiid? It's like Monroe has to hit 30 plus fantasy points for me on FanDuel to be completely valuable tonight because I just don't think you can take mid 20s out of him and be completely comfortable if all the other centers can go off.
Yeah, I don't disagree there. But I mean, it is a matchup where he did against Memphis last time out, put up 32 fantasy points and 27 minutes. And if Booker sits, like the offense does kind of flow through him a little bit. And we look at it like he's got some of these games where he has 4, 5, 7 assists. So it's a spot where he could definitely go off. And I absolutely love him here.
Using any of the other guards here?
Um, I do have interest again if Booker sits and like Isaiah Cannon, Tyler Ulis, both those guys are fine, cheap options. But it's mostly just Josh Jackson for me.
On the Memphis side of things here, a lot of guys out. We're still dealing with James Ennis, Chandler Parsons out, JaMychal Green's ruled out. Um, Deonta Davis questionable, Tyreek Evans questionable. Evans is an illness.
Yeah, he's missed quite a long time with that illness. I think is what 3 games or something like that he's missed. It's been a week since he last played. He got shots up at practice yesterday and is hopeful to play today, but they're going to see how he feels. If he plays, I'm just locking him in at that price. He's 8,200 on DraftKings. See, what is he on FanDuel? 8,200 on FanDuel against the Phoenix Suns in a game that you expect to play at a pretty fast pace against a team that can't protect the rim, turns the ball over a lot, really struggles against point guards, shooting guards, whatever you want to classify Tyreek Evans as. Yeah. And he's showcasing himself for a trade to a potential contender. Yeah. Just give me all the Tyreek Evans.
Yeah, I'm with you here. It's just such a good spot for him. A guy who's obviously just going to crush usage against the Phoenix. Yeah, it's a tough fade. Like especially on FanDuel where you can play a little bit more of these guys because it's a little bit easier to fit in. As far as the rest of the Memphis guys go, like I don't have a ton of interest in Marc Gasol, just given the other center options. Jarrell Martin is interesting. He's been playing pretty well. Price is coming up a little bit, but he's a guy who's been over 20 fantasy points in each of his last 5 healthy games, and obviously should see minutes here tonight.
Yeah, it bothers me that he's battling knee soreness in both the left and right knees. But like they're running out of bodies to use here. If we get news that he is in and he's good to go, he's a fine cash option. Like he's not a guy that I feel comfortable can go out and get me like 30 fantasy points. I think he's done it like once over his last 10 games. If he does not play, you could look at Deonta Davis. It was questionable. Everybody's questionable. Like they're all questionable here. Ivan Rabb played 21 minutes against the Clippers, had a solid outing. He'd be a name to keep an eye on depending on how the injury news breaks down. I wrote up Wayne Selden in today's tournament article. Minutes have been solid for him. And people might be like, oh, well, that's because Tyreek Evans was out. Well, the last game Tyreek played against New Orleans on January 20th, Wayne Selden, 27 minutes, 38 fantasy points. The next game was against Philly. I think he got ejected in that game, but he still played 14 minutes in that game. He is a very high usage guy in a very paced up matchup against a terrible defense. 3,800 across the industry. I think he has plenty of upside in the spot. I do have a lot of interest in Wayne Selden here, and I think people are going to flock to Mario Chalmers and Andrew Harrison and Dylan Brooks and kind of overlook Selden.
Yeah, I think so too. And you mentioned Brooks. I don't mind him here at the small forward spot. It's still fairly cheap. Um, Not the highest ceiling guy here, but I think he can be out there and go between 20 and 25 fantasy points in the spot. Phoenix, a team that struggles against small forwards, especially of late, could rack up a couple of more peripheral stats just in this type of matchup as well.
He's a super high ceiling play if he shoots 75% from the floor.
Well, that's so easy to do in today's NBA.
But yeah, he's a fine cash option. Like you're putting in a guy that should easily get you like 22, 24 fantasy points. And again, like I said, if he shoots 75% from the floor, he has 30 fantasy point upside. So we're kind of waiting on news to see who's in, who's out. I wouldn't be shocked if like just a bunch of random stuff pops up on the Grizzlies injury report and like Marcus Gasol is questionable with the cough or a hangnail or some other BS, because that's just what the Memphis Grizzlies have done recently. So monitor the news closely. I think we broke down everyone that's in play from that game though.
Yep. Miami and Dallas, 197 total here. Not a huge fan of this game in terms of fantasy upside, but I will say Hassan Whiteside's price has dropped a little bit here. He's only 7,900 on FanDuel. He is, let's see it on DK,
Like
77.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't hate it against the Dallas front court because I think he's going to go overlooked here.
I wrote him up in the tournament article as well, right under Dwight Howard, and basically said if you wanted to fade Dwight on FanDuel or if you wanted to build two center lineups, Hassan Whiteside is your guy. I realize he's coming off two games where he played limited minutes. One of those was against Charlotte. He did not perform very well, but like this dude has been putting up big games in limited minutes at times against the Dallas team, 23rd in fantasy points allowed, to giving up over 50 fantasy points per game, giving up 45 rebounds per game. Yeah, Hassan Whiteside should absolutely smash tonight. I would recommend getting a decent amount of exposure to him, and it sounds like people might be off of him today because of the potential for limited minutes. So I do like a lot of Hassan Whiteside, especially in tournaments.
Yep, I do too. Rest of the Heat team, I don't like that much here. Goran Dragic has kind of fallen off with guys starting to get a little bit healthier in that backcourt. Like he's not as appealing. Kelly Olynyk has been an interesting GPP option at his price. I don't mind taking some shots with him. He's only 4,600 on FanDuel. Over on DK, he's 5,200, so a little bit more expensive there, but I don't hate him as an option.
Yeah, I think everyone like Dragic is probably a solid cash game option in this matchup. Not a bunch of upside though. He just like he's coming off a bad game against Charlotte, but like the field goal attempts have been solid recently. Obviously, with Tyler Johnson coming back, that may eat into it. But I think you can get away with using him in cash games. You mentioned Olynyk; he's a fine option. I will say Wayne Ellington has been like quietly just shooting the lights out recently. I don't mind taking a flyer on Wayne Ellington here in a matchup against Dallas. I think he's fine. Scored 28 points against them last time out. Just an interesting guy to keep an eye on. Bam Adebayo, if you do think Whiteside sees limited minutes, you could roll him out there at 3,800. Even if he only gets like 20 minutes, that's plenty of time for him to put up a big game against this Dallas front court. So I don't mind those guys. Tyler Johnson, if we get news that like he's going to play, starters like actual real minutes, you could look at him against Dallas as well.
Olynyk's usage has been kind of crazy high of late. 4 games here against Charlotte, 27%, against Sacramento, 26%, against Houston, 31%, against Charlotte again, 35% usage right off the bench here for Olynyk in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, he's taking a lot of shots. That's for darn sure. Getting some rebounds and assists too. So like I think he's a fine tournament option here.
Yep. Yeah, you pretty much cover the rest of the guys there. No one else I'm really interested in.
No, like no one from this game outside of Whiteside is like that appealing. Everyone else is just like guys that you could plug in if they fit.
Yeah. On the Dallas side, I don't really have interest here, but I guess if they're going to be limited at the guard, I'll have a little bit of interest with Barea questionable, Devin Harris questionable. That just pretty much kind of logs minutes into, really Yogi Ferrell and Dennis Smith and Wes Matthews as well.
Yeah, I think I saw a tweet earlier that Harris was at practice or at shoot around this morning, so I would probably expect him to go ahead and suit up. If Barea is out, you could look at Dennis Smith and Farrell and whatnot. If Barea plays, he's cheap enough to consider as a solid option at his price. But yeah, this Dallas, I don't really want anything to do with Dallas in this matchup, except like Harrison Barnes is just your usual. He's playing a lot of minutes and is fairly cheap and has a solid floor play for cash games.
Yeah, that's about it. So I think we can move along here.
Yes, please.
Boston and Denver, final game of the night. So here with the Boston side, just look at Irving and what he's been doing of late. It's been pretty insane. Just, his real points over his last 4 games, 37, 20, 33, 40. Um, I don't mind going back to the well here with Irving.
Yeah, and you expect the minutes to be solid for him with Marcus Smart and Terry Rozier. Like Rozier is questionable. Smart obviously out because he tried to punch a picture and missed or something.
That happens.
Yeah, right.
He does miss a lot, and
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, he does. So yeah, you expect the minutes to be there for Irving in an excellent matchup against a Denver team that gives up the fourth most fantasy points per game to point guards. They really struggle against the pick and roll. They struggle to defend isolation. That makes up a significant amount of Kyrie Irving's possessions. Yeah, Irving should just absolutely smash here. Excellent cash game option. Um, every time we say Irving doesn't have upside, he goes out and just has massive upside games. So definitely not going to say that, but I don't really see a reason in cash games to fade him. If you want to roll with the chalk, go for it, and in tournaments as well. I already mentioned Walker and Schroeder as two guys that you could use as pivots, but just a great spot for Irving here. And with Boston struggling of late, it feels like he's just kind of putting everything on his shoulders and trying to will them into wins. So yeah,
it's been like that because really outside of Irving, we've seen a steep drop off in Tatum, we've seen a decent drop off in Jaylen Brown, and that's what my kind of worry is. Their prices are dropping as well. I don't mind them on tonight's slate, but I also kind of worry it's if I'm only going to get 20, 25 fantasy points, I'll just drop down an extra 1,000 and use Marcus Morris.
Yeah, Morris is a very, very interesting target here. You would expect, coming off the bench and especially without Smart and possibly Rozier, that some of the offense will flow through him. I do like him a significant amount in the spot, minutes trending upwards, double-digit field goal attempts in 3 straight games, decent rebounding numbers there. So I do like Morris a decent amount. Shane Larkin is an excellent value option if Terry Rozier is ruled out, and might even be in play if Terry Rozier is ruled in, just because, Denver goes small at times and rolls a bunch of 3-guard lineups. So we could see that from Boston as well. Horford is the guy that I have a decent amount of interest in. Just been playing really, really, really well recently. Over 40 fantasy points in back-to-back games, double-digit rebounds in back-to-back games. Offense flows through him at times, 6 assists in 2 of his last 3 games. Denver has struggled of late against power forwards and centers. They're 23rd against power forwards and 20th against centers in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games. He feels like a very solid cash game option, and at that price, a 40 fantasy point, 40, 43 fantasy point outings, not out of the question.
No, definitely not. And he's, like you said, he's just a guy who I think will get overlooked, playing really well. I don't really worry about the matchup. I think obviously, as you kind of hinted at, you like him more when he plays at the 4 here. And I kind of expect that a lot here tonight against Denver.
Yeah, it's a good spot. It really is a good spot for him. You talk about him going overlooked. I don't think people realize the season that he's having has been outstanding. The amount of people are like, why is Horford in the All-Star game? Tells me people just don't realize what he has done for this team this year and how good he has been. But he's an excellent option here. Again, I feel like he's very, very safe at that price.
Yep, I do too. Let's look at Denver. A couple guys coming off big games. Gary Harris, Nikola Jokic, obviously a triple-double. I want to start with Gary Harris. Obviously Marcus Smart being off the floor, and I think you can be accustomed to a guy, with Roberson, the defense drops significantly when guys like that are off the floor. And that we saw that, we saw it against Golden State. Obviously it's easy to say against Golden State, but maybe I'm being a homer, but I don't think Curry drops 48 if Smart's on the court.
No, probably not. I think because Marcus Smart is off the floor, is out, JJ Barea ruled out for Monday. Okay. Because Marcus Smart is out, it makes these Denver guards much better options here. Starting with Harris, a guy they keep on coming out and saying that he's going to play limited minutes, and then he still goes out and plays 35 minutes. People are like, he doesn't have a seal, he doesn't have upside, and then he comes out and drops 40 fantasy points. he's a safe option. Like the steals are there. He's getting the rebounds and the assists. He's scoring really well, shooting the ball over 50% over his last 2 games. I like him a lot here against Boston. I think he's a fine option. Jamal Murray came off the bench last game because he was being disciplined by the team. Um, didn't he started out really, really bad, didn't finish that great, only had 27 fantasy points. I think through the first half he had he played like 11 minutes and had like 3 turnovers or 4 turnovers in 11 minutes. I do like him a lot here too. 2 of his last like 4 games just shooting the lights out. He's a guy, like if he's hot from the floor, like he's gonna just smash. And after watching Steph Curry just light up the Celtics without Marcus Smart, like it gives me hope that Jamal Murray could do the same thing.
Yeah, I like him a lot here tonight. Like this is a game you were telling me before the show. You kind of expect this one to get overlooked a little bit. And I'm in agreement just because both these teams on paper obviously defensively look very good. You're not getting a lot of positives or not a lot of kind of eye popping matchups, so that usually results in a drop of ownership. What about the bigs here? Like we've seen Trey Lyles start to bounce back. He's averaging 27 fantasy points over his last 5. I don't mind using him. It looks like he's back again here.
Yeah, I do like Lyles here a little bit. It's interesting to know like the spots where you really want to attack the Boston defenses with post up players and with guys that run the as the roll man in the pick and roll. You mentioned Lyles. He's operating as the roll man in the pick and roll 15.1% of his possessions. It's in the 84th percentile of efficiency. Posting up 11.5% of his possessions, 83rd percentile in his efficiency. So he's a guy that you can look at that can kind of attack those weaknesses in the Boston defense. The same thing for Jokic. Like Jokic, not nearly as efficient on either one of those play types, but again, 20% as the roll man and 24% post up. So again, he's another guy that you could look at, and I think people are going to be off of him because it's a quote unquote bad matchup.
Yeah, you look at if you're looking at last game for stuff, Jokic did not play in that last game against Boston. So I think that obviously hinted some of the usage because Gary Harris took 25 shots in that Boston game.
Yeah, Jokic wasn't in that game. Horford didn't play in that game. So yeah, I don't think you can glean too much from that last matchup.
No, definitely not. But yeah, definitely a good game to target. And that's it. 6 games. Let's go highest score below 9K.
Oh, just below the Dwight Howard spot, huh?
Just below.
This is going to be a dick move. Kyrie Irving.
Damn it. Oh, man. Let's see here. I'll take Hassan Whiteside 7,700.
Solid. I thought you might go Tyreek Evans.
I was gonna, yeah, that was my original plan, but I'll go Whiteside there. So it's gonna wrap it up for us. You can enter dailyfantasycafe.com, check out Brent's GPP article, cheat sheets, optimizer, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Good luck tonight.